Hello. Welcome everyone to the Talking Culture Forum tonight. My name's Craig Shufton. I'm a radio producer and presenter at Triple J. And I'm very pleased to introduce today a founding member of the classic hard rock band Deep Purple, and a guy who co-wrote a song which is probably responsible for more guitarist careers than anyone can count, with the song Smoke on the Water. And in 1969 he did an incredibly ambitious thing, which a lot of people thought was impossible, and wrote a concerto for rock band and orchestra, which is being performed as part of the Sydney Festival by the local band George, with Jon conducting the piece that he wrote. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Lord.
Thank you. Hi there. I'm not conducting it.
Not conducting it?
No, I can't do that.
I've got off to a good start.
No, it's all right. Don't worry. I'm just playing.
Playing. Jon, a concerto for group and orchestra. In 1969, was there anything like that on the market?
Not for a rock group, no. My idea for it came from buying a LP a couple of years before, which was Dave Brubeck and Quartet and the New York Philharmonic, and for jazz band and symphony orchestra. And I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And at the time I thought, if I was in the right kind of band, I would do that. And in 1969, after Roger and Ian Gillan joined the band, I felt it was the right kind of band. Mm. So I approached the rest of the guys, and they basically said, "Are you out of your mind?" And I said, "Probably, but let's have a go."
Did you have to work on it, on the band for a while to sort of talk them into it?
A couple of jars did it, I think. And it's like it was just mooted as an idea, and my manager at the time came to me a few months later and said, "Were you serious about that concerto for group and orchestra idea?" I said, yeah, I'm working on it as we speak. He said, "Well, you better work a little harder, because I've booked the Albert Hall."
Now, tell us about the Albert Hall, because I haven't been there, but it's kind of a legendary venue for...
It's like the inside of a wedding cake. It's a beautiful place. It's acoustically not brilliant. They've done as much as they could, but they've hung sort of giant inverted mushrooms in the ceiling.
Oh, we've got mushrooms here too at the Opera House. They're supposed to fix acoustics.
Yeah, well, we set traps for our acoustics. We haven't caught any yet, but it's a beautiful place, and when you walk on the stage, the knowledge of who's stood there before you,
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so it's he booked that, and he booked the orchestra, and this was May, I guess, of '69, and I said, "Oh, when for?" He said, "September." I said, "Are you out of your mind? I haven't even started work." There's orchestration to do, man.
Yeah, and that's a big job.
I called everybody man in those days, by the way.
That's what you did back then.
Yeah.
I mean, how was what you wanted to do with this project different to things like, the Beatles' use of orchestral instruments and orchestras in their tracks, or things like Phil Spector and the kind of productions that he was doing? What was different about this?
Well, I started off as a pianist. I started on piano at the age of 5, and very quickly grew to love orchestral music. It was my first love. I adored it. And then I heard Little Richard and Elvis and stuff, and wow, it was fantastic. But I was incredibly lucky, because my intense love of that didn't drive out the previous love. I liked both. Yeah. And the idea was to put the two things that I love together, and to see if I could, in some sort of vaguely graphic way, pay homage to both. And the scheme of the piece, if you like, it has there's a sort of a sub-story to it, which is that it's in three movements, like a regular concerto, but the first movement is the antagonism between the two, and in fact, when the group first enters, after about 6 minutes of build-up from the orchestra, and the orchestra seems to to get a little cocky, you know, and it's like, hey, we've got hold of this, you know, this is, you know, who are these guys at the front anyway, you know? And then they come up with this really rather silly little tune, which the band then enters with 3 big chords, and then you hear the orchestra just like scurrying away. It's quite a simplistic sort of.
But as you said, very dramatic, and you can.
Yeah, I also did it with a smile on my face. I mean, I was never ever. I didn't want to be taken as at that time as a serious composer. You know?
Well, in a sense, I mean, this is what I think is really interesting about it. You're almost having a laugh at the process of getting a rock band and an orchestra together. The piece actually tells the story of what you had to do to make it.
Yeah, the first movement is conflict. The second movement is some kind of concord. Yeah. Although I'm a quieter way than the first. And the last movement is a pure rave up. You know, yes, we've worked out how to play together. Yeah. So let's have a bash at it. And
that initial tension between you and the orchestra that were performing the work, where did that come from? Was it a fear of new composition, or just a feeling that rock music wasn't to be taken seriously?
1969, yeah, it was.
Yeah, a lot's happened since then.
Oh, a hell of a lot. I mean, you know, music has become much more a single entity. You know, the people on one side of the musical spectrum are more open to the other side now, much more. But this was, I mean, there were guys in the orchestra, in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in 1969, who had been in it since 1869. You know, I mean, there was very sort of. There's a wonderful bit on the film of the event where you can actually see one old gentleman, I think somewhere in the violas. He'd probably been on the back row of the violas for like 40 years, you know. Yeah. And you can actually see he's almost in pain.
You hurt him with your
we actually hurt, not sort of physically hurt him, but just sort of mentally hurt him, you know. And you can see him sort of, thinking, what am I doing here?
Were you ever worried that the orchestra could actually potentially sabotage the piece just by the fact that they were not excited about it or not prepared to?
Well, at a couple of rehearsals, they effectively did. Yeah. It took the strength and commitment and friendship of the conductor, a remarkable man, Malcolm Arnold, now Sir Malcolm Arnold, and 81, I think, now. To shout at them, in fact. Really? As I said to you earlier, that some of the things he said to them I couldn't actually tell you because the use of Anglo-Saxon was prolific and rather startling. But he did say at one point to them, he banged his baton on the thing and said, stopped the music at one point. He said, no, this won't do. We're going to make history tomorrow. We might as well make bloody music at the same time. These 5 young men are playing like heroes. You're playing like an Anglo-Saxon,
yes,
deleted. And it sort of brought them up short because he was one of them. In fact, he started his career as a trumpet player in the London Symphony, and a very fine one too. He was principal trumpet, and he then took to composing and conducting.
Yeah. So he was a very useful bridge between.
Enormous. And had it not been for him, I think the piece would have fallen to bits.
Yeah. And once you did get over those problems and the orchestra started to realise the piece the way that you wanted it, what was that like to have something like that realised by a whole orchestra for the first time? That must have been incredible.
It was one of the greatest moments of my life when I actually heard it played properly for the first time at the dress rehearsal.
Yeah. Because I guess now we take it for granted that a composer can also be a producer. That if you have an idea for a multi-part symphony in your head, you can in some way make that happen even without actually having the orchestra. But you had to wait, didn't you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And to contrast it with what happened this afternoon, I've just had the first rehearsal with the Sydney Symphony, who sight read it. And gave me goosebumps. Right. It was brilliant. Yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's just not a bad old piece. It's like, it's all right. And it was lovely. And not just, orchestras have the quality of the back desks, for example, is so much higher than it was, say, 40 years ago. So I don't. It's a sweeping statement, but certainly in the orchestras that I've worked with lately, I worked with the LSO in '99 on this piece, and it was an astonishing experience. And today, my wildest dreams were fulfilled. I mean, the SSO is a great orchestra.
And 1999 was the return of Concerto for Group and Orchestra after a sort of protracted absence from live performance because the score actually went missing. How did that happen? How do you lose?
Well, we did it in America in 1970. We did it at the Hollywood Bowl with LA Philharmonic, and I think someone just forgot to pick the music up afterwards. You know, it's easily done. You know, if you've got a party to get to, I mean, you know,
you've got priorities.
Yeah, sure. So it was. I guess that's just what it was, and I thought that he'd done it, and he thought I'd done it, and and really, we were never going to play it again. I thought, so I never bothered to make sure that the music had come back.
Really? So you didn't think it was that?
No, I mean I thought it would be in the office, you know, and my manager would surely have picked that up. I mean, for the amount of percentage he was taking out of my pay, he should have done something, you know, you know, so 20 years later, when somebody said, "Hey, it's 20th birthday of the concerto, should we do it again?" Yeah.
Small problem. So, but through that period of time, there were various expressions of interest, weren't there?
We got letters, you know, from just the strangest places, you know, Estonia, Ecuador, not all places beginning with E, but you know. Some really.
It's just one letter.
Yes, right.
One letter. Yeah.
A lot of people wanted to do it, but then I guess about 1997, when the 30th anniversary of it was looming, the rest of the band actually, it wasn't I who said, you know, let's do its 30th birthday. It was the rest of the band who said, wouldn't it be a good idea? You know, well, after I'd wired my jaw back up, you know. You want to do the concerto because they famously dissed it, you know, in the press. Oh yeah, well that's John's sort of classical thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's not what we want to be. We want to be a rock band, you know. And well, so did I. I was very happy playing the part of a rock and roll keyboard player. It's dear to me. I love it. But you know, as Steve Morse famously said a couple of years ago to a question, it's okay to be good at more than one thing, you know. It's really all right.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to have a go at this. So when they came back to me in '97 and said, let's do it, and they said, can't you write it out again?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
How about we do it in 2050 then, you know?
Because that's an incredible job, isn't it?
Well, I started. I had a go, and I think my wife would have heard me screaming as I tore out my hair, you know, going, I can't, this is impossible, you know.
How did you go about it? Were you just listening to the recordings and trying to figure it out?
Yeah, and just realizing what a mammoth task it was.
How far did you get into it?
Bar 7.
Yeah. So how is it that we get to hear it again now?
Well, I was, February of '99, I was getting out of a car in a very rain-swept Rotterdam, and I'd just been in the back of this car, been driven, I don't know if any of you have ever been driven or driven yourselves in Germany, where speed limit, what is speed limit, you know, it's, I know you have speed limits, but you know, it's just, yeah, you do, yeah. But you also have Mercedes that do 50 million miles an hour, you know. Followed by some guy in a Porsche who wants to get past. And when you're driving yourself at like 125, 130 miles an hour, to have a guy come up behind you and go flash, flash, get out of my way, you know, it's like,
that's pretty frightening.
Yeah, but anyway, so I'd been driven up from somewhere in the wilds, and I was ragged, you know, and I got out, and this young man came up to me and said, Mr. Lord, may I talk to you a minute? And I said, I want a cup of tea, man.
Yeah. Still saying man.
Yeah, listen, then you can't get the name wrong. You know. And I want to shower, and I'm sorry, but we've got a concert in an hour, and I just, you know, no way. I was just doing a bit of a David Coverdale, you know, flipping flipping my hair back. And he said, it's about your concerto for group and orchestra. So,
Yep.
sit down, young man. He became a young man then. And I said, what about it? He said, I think I've managed to recreate most of it.
Incredible. So how did he do that?
He was he's a Dutch music student. Well, was a student at the time. He was just passing out of music school. He's now a composer who's got some good stuff going. And he wanted to write his thesis on the concerto for group and orchestra. It's something that had fascinated him for years, since he was knee-high. And he found out very quickly that the score had been lost. And he actually he phoned all these people. He'd phoned the Royal Philharmonic in Los Angeles. I mean, he'd been to a lot of trouble to try and get it. So he bought the video of the film of the event, and he bought the CD.
Yeah.
And he just played it and played it. And played it.
Rewinding the shots of the strings over
2
and
years.
over again.
Yeah, he was actually pausing the video so he could see where the player's fingers were, and astonishing piece of musical detective work.
And when you looked at the score that he made from that, how close had he got to what you were?
He was way up in the 80% area, in most of it. And of course, looking at it again, it was such a wonderful moment. I mean, it almost brought tears to my eyes because there were those notes, that I'd lain on the floor, and I was so confident in 1969. I lay on the floor, scoring it in ink.
Yeah, like a real composer.
Not pencil and eraser, but and there it was, and I was so happy to see it, and so I was able then to take it back to England, and he'd done the first movement and most of the second movement at that point, and he was having trouble with the third movement because it's so fast. The third movement it's ready, steady, go, and off. It's
That's
ridiculous.
when the band and the orchestra are finally all getting going for it. Yeah,
going for it, as you say. Yeah. So I had to rescore quite a bit of the last movement and a lot of it came back. I remembered, and I took the opportunity to correct a couple of howlers that I'd put in.
Really, things that sort of slipped by you the first time around.
There was a great moment in the rehearsals in '69 when the principal cello player came up to me, and he was very nice. He sort of looked around first and he said, "Mr. Lord, this bit here?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'd love to play it for you, but it's impossible on the instrument."
It was a learning curve. Yeah.
He said, but he said, "However, if you put that there and that there, then I'll play." I said, "Thank you very much." But it was really nice, and he was one of the really nice guys.
Yeah. The Australian band George are going to be performing Concerto for Group and Orchestra with you as part of the festival. Why George? Did they come to you?
Yeah, they did it last February at QPAC with the Queensland Orchestra. And
what were your impressions of that?
I loved it. I mean, it's a totally different take on it, and I'm thrilled to bits because the piece takes it. Which is very nice to find out.
That there's room for people to make their own interpretation.
That it actually can support a different interpretation. I mean, very different. Anybody who knows the piece as performed by Deep Purple will have some lovely surprises.
Yeah. So do you think they've understood the story of the piece a little differently? They've taken a different idea from it.
Yes, they've taken a more gentle attitude, and it's interesting now because in the first movement where it's very much like a concerto grosso, it's very much the orchestra and the band and the orchestra and the band, and the idea is that one keeps trying to supersede the other. It's like it's a kind of a bless you. It's a kind of a na thing, going on between the two. But now it's George saying, it's okay. You don't have to tear your hair out. It's all right. Just we'll be cool, And it's a
different relationship.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very, very pleasant way of looking at it.
Yeah.
When we get to the last movement, then it's still plenty of sound and fury. But
ballistic.
But the first movement is the most different. I think.
Yeah. I mean, George, I guess, are an interesting band in that they're quite ambitious with their sounds. They use, you know, on their album, there's a lot of different instrumentation. They're never just the sort of standard, you know, four instrument rock band. Do you I guess do you feel that your concerto opened up a lot of people to the possibilities of using different instruments with instrumentation?
I think it might have done, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, I've had some wonderful letters from people saying thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
You know, but I was always very anxious not to be seen, or not, and certainly not to make myself out to be some kind of evangelist or teacher or anything. I'm a musician. That's what I do, and I was able to do this. I taught myself to orchestrate, and by the skin of my teeth, I got away with it, and I've got better at it as the years have gone by. And now I feel confident. You know, if somebody says, "What are you?" I can feel quite confident saying I'm a composer.
Yeah.
You know, because I've worked at it and got myself to that point. But in 1969, you know, I was a composer. You know, I'm a composer. I was really just trying hard
to figure out if you could do it.
To get what was in here down onto paper.
Yeah.
And as I say, by the skin of my teeth, I did it. But it seems to have, I've spoken to a lot of people. It seems to have, you know, I had a wonderful letter which I've kept from a young man who was, he was in a downward spiral. He lived in Florida, and he was in childhood detention centers. He was getting into petty crime and all this kind of stuff. But he could play the guitar. And he heard the concerto of group and orchestra, and it spun his head around. You know, he thought, "Oh, that's fantastic," you know.
Yeah.
And he went out and he bought, started buying orchestral music. Long story short, he ended up going to Juilliard, and he's now a classical guitarist. He plays, acoustic classical guitar. One story among loads.
Sure.
That's the power of music. It's great.
Yeah.
That the music can do that, and mine's no better or no worse than any other millions of stories about other pieces of music that have done that to people. But it's a salutary feeling.
We've talked mainly here about the concerto, but I'm sure there's all kinds of questions that people are waiting to ask about Jon's career generally, about Deep Purple and his solo work as well. So we might take some questions from the audience. So.
I was just going to ask, the heaviness of the In Rock album, was that in some way a reaction coming so soon after the concerto to say to people, look, we are actually a heavy rock band?
It's been perceived as that, yes, and it's actually been written that is the case. But in fact, it wasn't quite as simple as that. We were actually already moving in that direction. We'd already, in the April of that year, I think, had signed up Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, and were writing stuff that became In Rock. And the reason I had such a difficult time orchestrating and writing the concerto for group and orchestra is because we were working 6 nights a week, and I was getting back at 2 a.m, you know, and putting on a huge great pot of coffee and just working through till first light, you know, to get it finished, because this prat of a manager had booked the Albert Hall, you know. So and also if you look at the program that we. Because Deep Purple played 3 or 4 numbers that night without the orchestra, and one of those numbers was Child in Time. So we'd obviously already written that and performed it before. But it's a convenient way of looking at a step in our career. But we had actually already made the decision, and it was, I hasten to add, a group decision. It wasn't just like as has been written, Richie's reaction to my concerto. It's a convenient sort of journalistic...
It sounds good drama.
Yes, it's good, but it actually dramatises something that wasn't the case.
What was the Philharmonic's take on a song like Child in Time? Did they see any musical merit in it?
I think they were in the pub. But at the time, no. Of course, there were members of the orchestra who were very, very open. I mean, I don't wish to characterize the RPO in 1969 as just a bunch of, anti-rock ageists, the wrong way around. But there were several in the band, in the orchestra rather, who were fine. Janet, sir?
I'd like to ask you a question about Pictured Within.
Oh, yeah.
To me, I feel the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard.
Oh,
and
bless you.
I am very deeply moved by it.
Thank you.
But as the composer, what inspired that? It seems like it must have been easy for you to write, or you were going through something which was bringing that out of you, that music out of you.
There's a kind of a yes and no answer. Yes, it was easy in some parts, and no, others parts of it were very difficult. It was a very emotional time. I lost both my parents within a year of each other, just before I made that. And I'm sorry, but I have to lighten the thing a moment, because wasn't it Lady Bracknell who said to lose one parent seems like unfortunate, to lose both seems like carelessness. Okay. I think it's Oscar Wilde, bless him. My mum's departure first was bad enough, but then my dad, who was really my hero, went a year later, and it was the spark behind it, I think. A lot of the themes I already had, but the actual way of putting it together and making that kind of like a 70-minute suite of music in a way that sort of hangs together, I think, was a result of that loss. And I was in the studio about 6 months after my dad died to start on it. So that's, I think, got a lot to do with it. I'm extremely proud of it. I think if I never wrote another note, I'd be okay with that.
I agree.
Thank
It seems
you.
to run the gamut of emotions, from melancholy through to quite joyous and uplifting.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. I'm thrilled to bits with it, and I'm glad that. Can I do a little plug? I'm glad EMI have brought it out here in Australia.
Thank you, EMI. Another question.
Is that right? Yes.
With notation, you handwrite all your stuff?
Yeah, I did, and still do. Although what I do now is, once I've got it down in pencil, I work in pencil now, on manuscript paper, then I've got a score writing program now called Sibelius.
Sibelius?
Yeah, which I love it. And what it actually does is it takes the composer one stage further into the process of producing music, because what we used to do is to sort of hand it to a copyist. You'd make a fair copy and then give it to a copyist who would extract all the parts and make it, and so on and so forth. Now you can actually hand to the librarian of an orchestra a printed piece of music from your Sibelius program. So.
Has it changed the sound of your music, do you think, to be able to hear things more quickly, to make changes more quickly?
No, I think it would be. We were talking earlier about the sounds that Sibelius can generate. They're okay, but I'm awfully glad my music doesn't sound like that. Synthesized MIDI sounds are not, but it's enough to give you a rough idea if that's what you want. But I use it much more for the look of the thing and the feeling of security of having fair copy like that.
Back in those dark ages before technology, how did you actually go about testing your ideas and whether they worked? And did you find that some of the things you had in your head and had written down just didn't work in the real world?
I did a couple of pieces after the concerto where I had no chance to hear anything until the first rehearsals. And I think all you can do is I mean, what I did, and still do, is if I hear a sound in my head and I can't quite get the feel of how to make it work, you know, should it be clarinet, should it be flute, should it be this combination or that combination, I'll go back to the masters. You know, I'll look at a Tchaikovsky score or Beethoven or whatever to see if I can find out how they did it. I find that absolutely essential. You know, you have to go back to learn from those, because that's how they did it. I mean, that's the process, isn't it? I think, is that one generation takes from the previous one, builds on it, and passes it on to the next. I mean,
it's interesting. Also, we were talking earlier about composing and arranging the way they're quite. In some ways, they're quite different. Like you can. There's a famous but composing and orchestrating. Because orchestrating to me is just as much of an art and a what's the word I want? It's just as creative as the actual compositional process. Stravinsky said, you know, when I run out of ideas, when I can't compose, I orchestrate. Because it leads you into a creative process, I believe. So, but as to it, I mean, one of the great wonders of being a composer is when you actually hear what you've written, played by great musicians, especially for the first time. Although, you know, but even today, I've heard the concerto now about 40 odd times, but hearing it being read through by a great orchestra was still a wonderful experience, and that's the reward to me, anyway. I saw you first, so.
Given the length of time it took to reprise the concerto, and subsequent to that, we've heard the sort of majestic sound of Deep Purple playing their for want of a better word, normal repertoire with an orchestra, and it's a fantastic sound. How come it took you so long? How come it took Deep Purple so long to use an orchestra with their sort of standard Deep Purple music? Because I know that both you and Richie Blackmore, and I guess now Steve Morse, were big fans of classical music.
Mm.
Did you sort of see it as two different worlds, or?
I think it was a mindset. You know, I for many years, it was, oh, that's John's thing. And I'd sit in the corner and go, thanks. Should we do it again? Nah. And as I say, it took them coming to me to bring it back again. I'm not actually a great fan of orchestrations of rock tunes. It's not my favourite thing.
What do they suffer from generally, do you think?
Pomposity.
Yeah.
And God knows Deep Purple was pompous enough, No, I mean, no, actually, I don't think we were. But there's a danger of sort of inflation. And I think we, I think we skirted with it in the Albert Hall album, I like Pictured Within. It's not Pictures of Home. I like that orchestration. That was a good one. And but I'm not a huge fan of that. But it's but to answer your question, I think it just Gillan eventually, because he's very much, he's the lead singer. What can I say? That's how many lead singers does it take to screw in a light bulb? You know the old thing. Just the one. He stands there and holds it and expects the rest of the world to revolve around him. And so when Gillan sort of got this lovely bee in his bonnet again, like, hey, let's do the thing, So the rest of the band go, oh, okay, So that's really how it happened. It's as silly as that. I'll come back there and say, yes, sir.
Firstly, John,
I'll be back in a minute.
thank you sincerely for all the pleasure your music has given me over the years. Deep Purple, Whitesnake, solo stuff, it's just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And seeing you perform live has always been wonderful as well, and very grateful to have the opportunity to thank you in person today.
It's been a pleasure so far.
The comment that guess the selfish question is there likely to be more Jon Lord recordings available soon?
Yeah, there's another one due. I'm hoping to get in the studio in March. I've got quite a lot of stuff ready for it, and I think I know what I'm going to be doing. I really don't know yet what it's going to be like. I mean, I know what the tunes are like now, but I don't know how it's going to fit together. And
Are you on a bit of a roll recording-wise?
writing-wise, yeah,
Right,
I can't stop. But and I suppose most of you know that I have stepped out of Deep Purple. You know, I've done a Captain Oates. You know, maybe sometime. You know, I thought it was time. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and it only took me about 12 years to make it. So you know, it was very, very hard decision to make. But I feel good about it, and the rest of the guys seem to want to carry on. Well, that's fine. Like some atomic toy, you know, they never stop.
What made you feel that it was time to call it a day with Deep Purple?
The fact that I was wanting to write more and just and record more and do other things, and was just didn't have the space. And touring it's very, very it eats up a lot of time, and it eats up a lot of energy, and it eats up a lot of willpower when it comes to because a lot of to me anyway, and I'm if you read the literature, I think it's pretty much par of the course with most people who write. You have to give yourself a routine. You know, it's no good saying, I'll just wait till I feel inspired, you know, because it doesn't quite happen like that. You have to, you know.
So you'll go to work, you'll go to a place and start,
sit down and
make a time
start to write,
making,
you know, and see what happens.
Yeah.
And because of doing that, something does happen. You know, you may throw it away the next day, but
you've done something.
But you've done something. Yeah. And I really felt that this is what was calling to me, that this is what I ought to be doing. And whether I'm successful at it or not is in the lap of the gods, but it just feels so damn right that I did it. So, yes, back in the studio, March, April, I hope. And so towards the end of this year, something coming out. Go ahead.
Yes, John, I'd just like to repeat the sentiments of Jen over here. You sort of brought us all a lot of pleasure and possibly also a lot of sex over the years. Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask you about the Gemini suite and also Windows, which I think were the other follow-up to essentially the concerto, and where they fit into your development, how you see them now in retrospect, whether you actually perform them, whether you've got the scores, or you think about revising them. And secondly, about these days, it seems to be like a Dutch music student. There seems to be a conflation between the rock camp and the classical camp, where people jump across much more easily different styles of music. So even though, I suppose, music education, things like schools, unfortunately, has been downgraded. So just wondered if you could talk about that phenomenon as you see it from your point of view.
Okay, Gemini Suite was. I was very pleased with that. That was a BBC commission as a result of the concerto, and we did it the following year with Malcolm Arnold again conducting, and I recorded it with the London Symphony Orchestra. And I thought that was a big leap forward in orchestration. I was very pleased with the orchestration of it. Windows is an oddity. I was living in Germany quite a bit at the time, and spending a lot of time there at least. And I met a very sort of wild, crazy German conductor and violinist called Eberhard Schöner, who wanted to. He wanted to do exactly what you ended your question with. This sort of bringing together of. He was very forceful about that. You know, rock must meet classic music. It must. Okay, Eberhard. Well, yeah, you know, let's go there then. You know, and then the German television, one of the TV companies, were holding a prize-giving ceremony, and they wanted a big gala performance to close it all off. And so they went to Eberhard and asked him if he would write some music. So he came to me and said, let's do something together. You know, I'll write some of it, you write some of it. And he came up with this idea of, there's a form of Japanese, it's just a bit of interest. There's a form of Japanese poetry called renga, where apparently a bunch of Japanese poets sit in a circle and each do one line. And the art is in the line following, you know, and making art out of it.
It's interesting though that this, you know, this kind of excitement about bringing rock music and classical music together. Like, I know you've said that you're it's not a cause of yours, not something that you want to actually try to do. What is it? What do people want from that then? Like, why is it useful for those two things to come together? Is it?
Bloody difficult question, mate.
Or do you not care? I mean, is it?
No, I don't really.
No.
I mean, I think it's important. The gentleman here made a very important thing about the music in schools. I mean, it's disappearing daily. It's being eroded. And it's one of the worst decisions that any government could take. My government at home is terribly guilty of that. And you know, because it's not just forcing kids into sort of music appreciation classes they don't want to go to. It's using a part of the brain that doesn't get used otherwise, and it's encouraging ways of looking at life and at culture that is being eroded, and it worries me. And if by putting a rock band with an orchestra, you can change 3 people, you know, and give them a love of something, then maybe it's worth it.
Which concerto for group and orchestra?
Well, I think it has done over the years. Yeah. You know, it's also given some people high blood pressure. You know, you know, that's not such a good thing. But, you know, what a rock band?
Mostly rock critics.
Why would you want to do that? You want to be a rock band? Be a rock band. You want to be an orchestra? Be an orchestra. You know, so why do you want to put them together? Entertainment? I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, as the man said who took all his clothes off and jumped on the cactus, you know.
Why not? So,
Jon, what's the brief history behind the writing of the lyrics for the vocal section? I believe Mr. Gillan left it until a fairly late stage.
How about the afternoon of the performance? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fairly late. Ian, are you writing the lyrics? Yes, John, I'm writing the lyrics. Ian, are you yes, you know, day after day. And then we got to first rehearsals with the orchestra. No, I've got them somewhere. He wrote them just before the dress rehearsal. And he wrote them in an Italian restaurant over a large flagon of Chianti with Malcolm Arnold. You know, because Malcolm was a famous toper. He loved his drink. He doesn't drink anymore, but at the time he was famous, you know, for and Gillan and he became soul buddies in that department, you know, for certainly for that lunchtime, and it produced the lyrics. And what's lovely about the lyrics is that it's a genuine, heartfelt thing on Ian Gillan's part of saying, you know, what shall I do? You know, when they stand smiling at me, you know, look at the floor and be cool, or what shall I do when it all goes wrong? You know, how will I know when to start singing my song? And so they're all and he's fitted them beautifully to the tune, the 2 separate sections.
Was that pretty much standard practice for Gillan? That sort of last minute flurry of work here.
Last minute flurries in all sorts of directions.
Right.
Yeah, bless him. Yes, sir.
One more trivial note. Did you watch the movie This is Spinal Tap? And,
Yeah.
had a few moments where you thought, ouch, that's us?
No. I know who it is. And it's Iron Maiden, but it's... it's... of course, I think any rock band from late 60s, early 70s has had its Spinal Tap moment, you know, and that's the brilliance of the film. And that's has always been the job of satire is to burst balloons, you know, balloons of pomposity, you know, there is a quote, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, from an interview in the early, mid-70s or whatever it was when they first done it. You know, something along the lines of, I see us as sort of rock and roll gypsies, you know, like traversing the highways and byways of the planet, you know, bringing joy to people. Well, you know, you can see Rob Reiner reaching for his pen and going, oh yeah, I've got to have some of that, you know. So I don't. Whilst I think we might have made an appearance in the movie, I don't think we were the reason for it. But it's a brilliant movie. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Curious, it's a slightly different question. What sort of music do you listen to at home?
I've rarely listened to rock music at home. I don't know why. I used to listen to a lot more, but I listen to mostly to orchestral music at home, and I try not to call it classical music because it's not. Classical music is Mozart, and you know, end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th, right, century. But it's become the term, hasn't it? But I mostly listen to that.
Not jazz at all?
Hmm?
Not jazz at all?
Yes, quite a lot of jazz too. I'm extremely fond of I love to listen to Bill Evans play the piano. That's one of life's great pleasures.
Not much Iron Maiden.
No, that's Sunday afternoons. You know. Finish the Sunday Times. Yeah, get me Iron Maiden records out, mate, and just bop around the lounge. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, can't you just see it? Yes, sir.
When you're composing, do you come up with melodies first, then chord progressions, or vice versa, or changed over time?
I write in two specific ways. The way I'm trying to get out of writing is at the piano, because you tend to write piano music. And I mean, a lot of composers have famously wrote at the piano. Wagner, I believe, wrote at the piano, which is, when you think what he turned it into, I mean, that's, you know. But I find that if I write at the piano, I tend to write, you know, piano-ish music, and it's more difficult to turn it. So what I'm trying to train myself to do is to just lock on to whatever happens to be coming through that day and just write it down. Trying to do that, then it's usually a tune with an accompanying harmony somehow. Whereas if at the piano, I'll find a good tune and then mess around with harmony to make it fit or to change its aspect or change its style or whatever. I'd like to do the former more. I'd like to write less and less at the piano because it widens your scope, I think.
John, it's been fascinating talking music with you, but unfortunately we are getting the wind-up from behind the curtain.
Can we
Perhaps
have the
we've
last
time for
guy?
one more question? Yeah.
Yeah. Just because your hand went up with such force that I just thought...
It's a burning question.
I was intrigued by what you were saying when you were saying, I try and look into where the music's coming from that day. Where's it come from?
Oh, God, man. You know, if I knew that, and I could retire now. I could sell it.
Where does it come from for you?
Well, I've discovered quite a bit about myself in these last 10 years. One of the things I've discovered about myself is a more spiritual side. So I do believe that there is a connection with spirituality and the ability to make solid something as amorphous as an idea. But I couldn't say it doesn't. It's not sent from heaven. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. But I see it as some sort of. I always feel that it's somewhere here, you know, and that it's not coincidental. I don't think that when you see some people thinking about, and they tend to, you know, there's that kind of upward-looking thing. I just thank God that it does come through. You know, I mean, I must be paying the bill.
Jon, having successfully answered one of the most difficult questions in music journalism, I think we can probably call it a night.
Well, I've enjoyed every second of it. Thank you all for coming. Those of you that had questions that we didn't get in, well, if you'll interview me tomorrow, I'll try and answer some of them. Is that kind of thing? Thank you very much
Ladies and
indeed.
gentlemen, can you please thank Jon Lord?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Jon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you. See ya.